The UK is a fallen country. I mean, it's very, very clear that it's further along in being forced through the Cultural Revolution than we are. And thank God, there are people in the UK who are beginning to wake up to this. It's resulting in a lot of people who've never, ever politically protested anything, first of all, showing up to protest. And secondly, seeing the disparate treatment between they and the newcomers. Some of that's resulted in vandalism and violence against objects, not yet violence against cops, thank God. Well, not in any large degree. The UK will not tolerate any statements against the newcomers. They will embrace the newcomers at the cost of everybody who's ever lived there. It's the same thing as happening in the United States. None of it is accidental. None of it is incidental. None of it is organic. All of it is top down, bottom up, squeeze the middle. All of it's about a cultural revolution. All of it is about dividing these nations so that they can be more easily ruled from the top. All of it, every single bit of it. And it's not helpful to the so-called newcomers because you set up situations where they are evidently given privilege above everybody else and access to benefits no one else gets, and it is going to engender the sin problem of coveting and jealousy. Because it's being driven by the sin problem of coveting and jealousy and a desire to be God. But in the UK, cops have been put into a position I don't think they understand, and this is easy enough to prove, and they have a lot of better things to do. Talk about the better things to do and give you an instance of cops quite literally persecuting Jesus Christ. And you can say, you don't mean literally, you mean figuratively. No, I do not. I mean literally, and we can go to the Bible for that. The studio that I sit in is not a place I can get up and jump around and move around, and I don't do push-ups or things in here. So there's very little I can do to work on my fitness, except I'm working on it right now, even as I speak with you. In my bloodstream are the results of mast zymes. Mast zymes are really powerful digestive enzymes that went through 243 experiments before bioptimizers would put the breakthrough label on them. They're very fastidious about this. These enzymes, mast zymes, went through a test at Berkshire International University in Bosnia, side by side. People who took mast zymes, people who did not. People who took mast zymes saw a 1,200% increase in the presence of amino acids in their blood. That means more muscle-sustaining aminos, more muscle-building aminos. If you've been through any form of restrictive weight loss or you're going into it or you just want to reserve and have the muscle that you have and experience digestive comfort, easy. Go right now to bioptimizers.com/Todd. You get 10% off mast zymes and all their products at Bioptimizers. Don't let poor digestion slow you down from reaching your goals and your full potential. It's bioptimizers.com/Todd. Cops in London have a lot to do. It happens that there is a reported every single hour in London. And it's weird. It went up from 7,643 per day to 10,991 in other acts of sexual violence. Cases went up to 8,852. They're at a high of 9,334, again up from 7,643. What changed? Well, wasn't that about the time that the UK was introduced to the fact that they had to welcome illegal immigrants en masse? Now, illegal immigrants don't mean, that's not what that means. But Middle Eastern men from terrorist-supporting countries of military age who've been brought up to believe that sexual conquest is part and parcel of Islam, well, they do rape people. And they do consider it their right. So it's not illegal immigration. I mean, that's bad, and it destroys countries, and it's unfair, and it's lording power over others, and it's coveting, and it's jealousy, and it's lying, etc. But it doesn't equal unless the population of men you're bringing in have been brought up in that way. So the UK cops could be focusing on that, but they have a lot of other things to do, some things that are very, very important. For instance, this guy named Adam Smith Connor was in the UK, and he got approached by some kind police officers, very, very reflexively British polite, even as they're stealing his rights. But there are some details that really matter. And I'll give you the details after we go through this interaction.
We just wanted to sort of come over and just say hello in the first instance, but
Sure.
also just inquired to your activities for today.
Well, I'm praying.
just for your awareness, you are in an area which is governed by a public space protection order. I don't know if you're aware.
I am aware.
Of that public space protection order.
This is a public space protection order. You're in an area that's governed by this, just so you're aware.
They also call it a safe zone. There are signs located in the area just to make you aware of that and the area where certain activities are prohibited.
Sure. Yeah.
In terms of that, can I ask what is the nature of your prayer today?
In terms of that, may I ask what is the nature of your prayer today? What were you saying privately to God?
What is the nature of that? I'm praying for my son.
I don't want to probe. I don't want to sort of ask you to elaborate on that. But
Sure.
At the same time, it would be remiss of me to sort of not mention like I say, the area of the activity.
Sure.
In terms of that, there is a clause within the public space protection.
Within that, there's a clause within the public protection safety order around prayer.
Yes.
And around disapproved, around the activities.
Approval around the activities at the clinic here.
Right.
The activities being abortion, by the way.
As I say, whilst I don't want to probe as to the reasons you're praying for your son, it obviously is perhaps pertinent to the area.
I don't want to pry into the reasons you're praying for your son, but perhaps it's pertinent to the area you're in.
That you were in, and like I said, the PSPO and legislation around that.
Well, I'm praying for my son who's deceased.
I'm praying for my son who's deceased. And they still stand there. The male cop is simply looking at him threateningly. Oh, I don't mean to gender him. I'm sorry. Maybe he's a woman.
I'm very sorry to hear.
Thank you.
Very sorry.
So, again, I'm sorry for your loss.
I'm sorry for your loss, but
Ultimately,
ultimately,
you have to go along the guidelines of the public space protection order.
Right.
They say that we are in the belief, therefore, that you are in breach of clause 4A, which says about prayer and also acts of disapproval around the activities at the clinic.
I'm just standing praying.
I understand that, but the PSPO is in place for a reason. We do have
the PSPO is in place for a reason.
to follow through on those regulations.
Here's the details. That guy was about 50 to 75 meters away from the abortion clinic. That's almost an entire football field. He was standing behind a tree so that he wasn't in the direct line of sight of the abortion clinic. He had his back turned to the abortion clinic. In John chapter 15, verses 18 through 25, I will make my case that they are quite literally persecuting the Lord Jesus. After all, the Apostle Paul was told he did that. When he was still Saul, going about the world killing Christians, Jesus didn't come to him and saying, hey, you're persecuting my people. You're persecuting my children. He said, I am Jesus whom you are persecuting. If the world hates you, keep in mind, they hated me first. This is the Lord Jesus speaking in John 15, verses 18 through 25. If you belonged to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I've chosen you out of the world. That's why the world hates you. Remember what I told you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. If they've obeyed my teaching, they will obey yours. He's speaking here to the apostles. They would treat you this way because of my name, for they do not know the one who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not be guilty of sin, but now they have no excuse for their sin. And by the way, departing from the Bible for a second, the Lord Jesus has spoken to everybody. Everybody who's heard his word. And certainly there are tribal people and other people who have not yet heard that, but that day will come. The people in the UK have heard the word. Whoever hates me hates my Father as well. If I had not done among them works no one else did, they would not be guilty of sin. As it is, they have seen and yet they have hated both me and my Father. But this is to fill what is written in the law. In their law, he says, they hated me without reason. The cops that are enforcing that, well, order are quite literally persecuting Jesus. You can replace that man with Jesus. Now, you can do the same thing. When you think of, as you treat the least of these, so you treat me, you can do that with the so-called migrants, the newcomers. We can't hate them because we're to love our neighbors, even love our enemies. And many of these newcomers are enemies of the UK and enemies of our nation. And we have to love them. Or we persecute Jesus. As you treat the least of these, so you treat me. But remember this, Jesus followed the law up to the point of the cross. From the cross, he said, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do." About people who had whipped him and beaten him and come very, very close to killing him and ultimately would kill his body for 3 days. But there is a time, and it's coming, where that forgiveness is over, where redemption is no longer available. And I want you to think about these cops, so-called officers, on Judgment Day, when they sit, in fact, kneel at the foot of Jesus. And he says, when I was praying outside that abortion clinic, you persecuted me. If their time had come and they had not repented, is that something God's going to forgive on the spot? On the day of judgment? I can't begin to judge God's actions on that day, but we can look at some patterns. We are told we are eternal souls, and there are two places we will go. And even in the Bible, we're told that people will come to the Lord Jesus and say, wait a minute, didn't we cast out demons in your names? Didn't we do a miracle in your name? And the Lord's going to look at them and say, depart from me, I never knew you. If that standard stands for people who preach in his name, it should terrify all of us. I never knew you. Do those cops look like they know Jesus? Are they even aware of the fact that they are quite literally persecuting him? Our job is to pray for them. As hard as that is our job, and so we should.